Christmas morning, 5 stories up, a pregnant woman stands on her balcony, admiring the lights below. Her husband's hands rest on her shoulders. Then he pushes. She falls. 5 stories. Certain death. But she doesn't hit the pavement. She lands on a car. And not just any car, her billionaire ex-boyfriend's Mercedes. The man she left 5 years ago for the husband who just tried to murder her. Coincidence, fate, divine intervention. What happened next will break your heart and rebuild it. A story of survival, betrayal, and a woman who discovered she was stronger than she ever knew. If you're ready for a story that matters, hit like and stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with your thoughts. I read everyone. This is Natalie's story. The Christmas lights blurred into streaks of red and green as I fell. 5 stories. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously, every millisecond an eternity. Every eternity a heartbeat. The cold December wind cut through my sweater as Grant's final words echoed, "You trapped me." But I found a solution. My hands instinctively went to my belly. 7 months pregnant. Our baby, my baby, Harper. I'd already named her in secret. Never told Grant. Some part of me always knew it would come to this. The impact came like the world ending. Metal crunched, glass shattered. An airbag deployed somewhere beneath me. Then darkness swallowed everything whole. But let me back up. Everyone asked the same question, why didn't I just leave? The answer is complicated. The truth is, I was leaving. I just ran out of time. 3 months earlier, I sat in our Brooklyn apartment with a laptop open in incognito mode. Grant was at work, real estate broker, unpredictable schedule, which gave me windows of opportunity. Small windows, dangerous windows. I typed domestic violence shelters near me. 43 results. I'd memorized them all. St. Mary's in Vermont had space. No questions asked. They'd take me at 7 months pregnant. I just needed to get there. Under our bathroom sink, taped behind the pipe where Grant would never look, I'd hidden a burner phone. $1,800 in cash sat inside a tampon box, money I'd skimmed from grocery receipts over 18 months. $5 here, $10 there. Survival mathematics. My escape was planned for January 15th. The baby was due February 10th. I'd calculated everything: bus ticket to Vermont, $237. First month at a women's shelter, free. Time to file for divorce before Harper arrived, 4 weeks. Time to disappear completely, priceless. I had documentation. Photos of bruises, time-stamped and uploaded to a hidden cloud account Grant didn't know existed. Voice recordings from my burner phone, 3 years of verbal abuse, threats, escalating violence. I'd contacted a domestic violence hotline using the library computers. The counselor's name was Patricia. She'd helped me understand something crucial: leaving is the most dangerous time. Abusers don't let go easily. Grant controlled everything. Our joint bank account sent him alerts for every transaction over $20. He'd isolated me from friends systematically over 3 years, criticizing Becca until I stopped calling her, making scenes at family dinners until I stopped attending, monitoring my phone until I stopped using it for anything personal. The pregnancy was his final trap, or so he thought. I never wanted to get pregnant. Not with Grant, not in this marriage, but birth control fails, and I suspected Grant had tampered with my pills. When I saw the positive test 4 months ago, my first thought wasn't joy, it was terror. My second thought was escape. Because here's what people don't understand about abusive relationships. You don't stay because you're weak. You stay because leaving means risking everything. Your safety, your life, and now a baby's life too. Grant's mother, Claudia, made every my room. She was a family court judge, powerful, connected, ruthless. She'd made it clear that if I ever left Grant, she'd use every resource to take my baby. Judge's privilege, she called it. I called it what it was: blackmail. So I planned in secret. I documented everything. I saved money in invisible increments. I researched shelters in states where Claudia had no jurisdiction. I learned about restraining orders, custody laws, legal aid resources. I became an expert in my own survival. 4 more weeks. That's all I needed. Then Grant found a receipt. It was from a coffee shop 3 blocks from our apartment. 2 lattes, $8.50. The date matched the day I'd met with Patricia, my domestic violence counselor. Grant's eyes narrowed when he saw it. Who were you with? He asked. His voice was calm, too calm. That's when he was most dangerous. Becca, I lied smoothly. I'd practiced this. We ran into each other. He checked my phone, found nothing because I'd used the burner. But I saw the calculation in his eyes, the suspicion, the rage simmering underneath his controlled exterior. That night, he didn't hit me. He didn't yell. He just watched. And I knew. Whatever timeline Grant had been working on, whatever plan he'd been formulating, I just accelerated it. 3 days later was Christmas. Grant's mother came for breakfast. She always came for Christmas, swooping in with expensive gifts neither of us could afford. Performing the role of doting grandmother-to-be while pretending not to notice the tension crackling between her son and me. I made pancakes, perfect pancakes, set the table beautifully, wore a high-neck sweater to hide the bruises from 2 nights before when Grant had grabbed my throat during an argument about baby names. He wanted Grant Jr. I'd suggested Harper. He'd called me ungrateful. Claudia smiled at me across the table. You're glowing, Natalie. Pregnancy suits you. I smiled back, swallowed the truth, played my role. After she left, everything changed. Grant's face transformed. The mask dropped. Pure rage replaced the performance. You did this on purpose, he hissed. Trapped me. Now I'm stuck with you forever. Grant put in, please. I backed toward the living room, away from him, toward nothing. There was nowhere safe in this apartment. There never had been. I have nothing because of you. His voice rose. $85,000 in debt, collections calling, all because you wouldn't let me leave. I didn't know about the debt, gambling, I'd later learn, high-stakes poker, sports betting, money he didn't have, money he'd stolen from our accounts while I'd been carefully hoarding grocery change. You can leave anytime, I said. True words, dangerous words. Not with a baby on the way. He grabbed my shoulders. His fingers dug in bruises forming in real time. Not without looking like the villain. Ice filled my veins. What are you saying? He smiled. The worst smile I'd ever seen. If something happened to you, an accident, the stress of pregnancy, depression, if you jumped, Derek, stop. Wrong name. I'd called he Derek. My mind was fracturing. Grant, stop. Insurance money, freedom, a fresh start. He dragged me toward the balcony. The door opened, cold December air, 5 stories down, Christmas lights everywhere, families celebrating, safe, warm, everything I'd never have. Please, I whispered, the baby. I never wanted the baby. His hands moved to my shoulders, positioned me at the railing. I grabbed for him, for the railing, for anything, caught nothing but air. Goodbye, Natalie. The push came fast, sudden, final. And then I was falling, red and green streaks. Harper, I'm sorry. The metal of a car roof, the crunch of impact, an airbag deploying, people screaming, someone calling 911. I looked up. 5 stories. Grant stood on our balcony. Our eyes met. Then he went inside, closed the door, left me there to die. If the car hadn't been there, if I'd hit pavement, both of us would have died. Harper and me, gone. But the car was there, and against every odd, every probability, every law of physics and fortune, I survived. We both survived. That's where the story really begins. Beeping pulled me back, steady, rhythmic, a machine somewhere close. My eyes wouldn't open at first, too heavy, weighted down by exhaustion and trauma and drugs pumping through my veins. Everything hurt. A dull ache covered my entire body like a weighted blanket made of pain. My hands. I needed to move my hands. My fingers found my belly. Still round. Still there. I pressed gently. A flutter. Movement. A sob broke from my throat. She's awake. A woman's voice. Soft. Professional. A nurse leaned over me, young, dark hair pulled back, kind eyes. Natalie, can you hear me? I forced my eyes open to fluorescent lights, white ceiling tiles. Hospital. My baby, I croaked. My voice sounded like gravel. Your baby is alive, the nurse said. She squeezed my hand. You're both fighters. The doctor is coming. Alive. We were alive. The door opened. A woman in scrubs entered 40s, silver streaks in her brown hair, confident stride. Her badge read Dr. Ellen Reynolds, trauma surgery. Natalie, she pulled a chair close. I'm Dr. Reynolds. You fell 5 stories onto a parked car. By all accounts, you shouldn't be here. But you are. 5 stories, the balcony, Grant, Christmas morning. How long, I asked. 18 hours. We kept you sedated while we assessed your injuries. Fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, severe internal bleeding. But miraculously, your baby appears unharmed. We're monitoring closely. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked down my temples. Natalie, another voice, deeper, authoritative. I opened my eyes. A woman in a blazer stood near the foot of my bed. Detective, I could tell by the way she carried herself. I'm Detective Rachel Ford. I need to ask you about what happened yesterday morning. The nurse stepped back. Dr. Reynolds remained seated, her hand on the bed rail. Protective. Can this wait? Dr. Reynolds asked. She just woke up. The sooner we talk, the better, Detective Ford said. Not unkind, just pragmatic. Natalie, do you remember what happened yesterday morning? Yesterday, Christmas Day, the tree in our living room, lights twinkling, presents underneath, most from Claudia, always overdoing it, always overcompensating. Grant's face red with rage. His hands on my shoulders, the balcony door open, cold air rushing in. His voice, you trapped me. The push. I looked at Detective Ford. She waited, patient. Her eyes were gray, clear, no judgment, just focus. I could say I slipped. I'd rehearsed those words for years, practiced in the mirror while covering bruises with makeup. The lies sat on my tongue, familiar and comfortable. But Harper kicked, a strong, insistent flutter. She was fighting. I needed to fight too. My husband pushed me off our balcony. The words hung in the air, the first true thing I'd said about Grant in 5 years. Dr. Reynolds' hand tightened on the bed rail. The nurse's eyes went wide. Detective Ford's expression didn't change. She just nodded, pulled out a notebook. Can you tell me more? Before I could answer, the door burst open. Claudia Holloway swept in like a winter storm. Expensive coat, designer handbag, perfectly styled silver hair. Grant's mother, my mother-in-law. A family court judge with power and connections and absolutely no conscience. Natalie. She rushed to the bed, pushed past the detective. Oh my God, my poor girl. What happened? Grant is beside himself. Absolutely beside himself. Detective Ford stepped forward. Ma'am, this is an active investigation. I need you to wait outside. Claudia ignored her. She grabbed my hand, squeezed too hard. Her perfume lavender, always lavender, made me nauseous. Grant said you were decorating the balcony, Claudia announced, loud, making sure everyone heard. That you wanted more lights. He told you to wait. He told you it was dangerous. But you insisted. Pregnancy hormones. You've been so emotional lately. So impulsive. Ma'am, Detective Ford's voice got harder. I need you to step outside now. My son would never hurt anyone, Claudia continued. Her grip on my hand became painful. Her nails dug in. Never. Security will remove you if necessary, Detective Ford said. Claudia finally looked at the detective. Her expression shifted. Calculating. She released my hand, smoothed her coat. Of course, she said. I'm just worried. You understand. My son's wife, my grandchild. She leaned down, kissed my forehead, whispered in my ear. Be careful what you say. Dear, lies have consequences. I'm a judge. I have resources. You'll never see that baby again. Then she left. The room felt colder after she walked out. Detective Ford returned to the foot of the bed. Natalie, do you want to continue? I did. God help me, I did. I told her everything. Grant's rage about the pregnancy, his accusation that I trapped him, the names he'd called me, pity, the push, the sensation of falling, the Christmas lights streaking past. Dr. Reynolds stayed the whole time, her hand on my arm, steady, grounding. When I finished, Detective Ford closed her notebook. Thank you. I know that wasn't easy. A forensics team is processing your apartment. We have the car you landed on. A neighbor's security camera may have captured footage. He'll say I'm lying, I said. He always does. Let us worry about that, Detective Ford replied. Right now, you focus on healing. Both of you. She left. Dr. Reynolds stood. You need rest. But first, there's something you should know. The car you landed on, the owner has been here all night. He wants to make sure you're okay. Dylan Westbrook. He said you might know him. My heart stopped. Dylan. The car was Dylan's. Of all the cars on the street, of all the places I could have landed, fate, destiny, divine intervention, whatever you wanted to call it. Does he want to see me? My voice came out small. He said, only if you want to. No pressure. Dr. Reynolds smiled gently. He seems very concerned, very respectful. I looked down at my hands. My wedding ring still there. A simple gold band. Grant had picked it out. I'd never liked it. My phone sat on the rolling table beside the bed. Face down, I reached for it. My ribs screamed. The nurse hurried over to help. 3 missed calls. All from Grant. I stared at the screen. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock. The pattern was automatic. Compulsive. A habit formed over years of monitoring Grant's moods through text messages and calls. I put it face down again. Tell Dylan. I paused. Took a breath. Tell him I need time, but thank him for being here. Of course, Dr. Reynolds said. She headed for the door. Stopped. Looked back. Natalie, you're safe here. Hospital security is outside your door. No one gets in without clearance. Understand? I nodded. She left. The nurse adjusted my IV, checked my vitals. Try to rest, she said softly. Press the button if you need anything. Then I was alone, finally alone. I closed my eyes, saw the balcony, the railing, Grant's face, heard his voice. You trapped me. But I was the one who'd been trapped for 5 years. In a marriage that slowly crushed me day by day, piece by piece, until I barely recognized myself. I'd loved him once, or thought I did. He'd been charming, attentive, everything Dylan wasn't, or everything I'd convinced myself Dylan wasn't. Dylan with his intimidating wealth, his brilliant friends, his world I didn't fit into. Grant had been safe, comfortable, normal, until he wasn't. The baby moved again, stronger this time, a kick against my hand. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry I brought you into this, but we're going to be okay. We're going to be safe. I promise. I meant it. For the first time in years, I meant every word. 48 hours after the fall, Grant made bail, $500,000. His mother mortgaged her house. Judge Claudia Holloway, so committed to protecting her son that she'd risk everything. Her home, her reputation, her judicial ethics. Detective Ford delivered the news herself. She stood at the foot of my hospital bed, arms crossed, clearly frustrated. He's out, she said. No preamble. Ankle monitor, restraining order, 500 feet. He violates it. He goes back inside. But Natalie, you need to understand something. Men like Grant don't respect restraining orders. Paper doesn't stop bullets. My stomach turned. So he's just free after trying to kill me. That's how bail works, Detective Ford said grimly. He's presumed innocent until trial. The judge set bail high, but not high enough to keep him locked up. I'm sorry. I'd known this was possible, probable, even, but hearing it made it real in a way preparation couldn't soften. Where is he? His mother's house in Park Slope. We got surveillance, but we're stretched thin. Hospital security knows he's out. They're on alert. After Detective Ford left, I sat in the bed feeling the walls close in. The hospital suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a trap. Grant was out there, free, angry, and I was here immobile, vulnerable, pregnant. My burner phone was gone, lost in the fall or confiscated by police as evidence. The one link to my escape plan, my documentation, my secret preparation gone. I was back to zero. Worse than zero. Because now Grant knew I'd told the truth. He knew I'd spoken to police. He knew I'd broken his cardinal rule. What happens in our marriage stays in our marriage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, watching shadows move across the ceiling, jumping at every sound in the hallway. The baby kicked irregularly, sensing my stress. Maybe, or just objecting to being contained in a body running on pure adrenaline. At 2 in the morning, my hospital phone rang. The nurse had given me a new cell clean number. Only 3 people had it: Detective Ford, Becca, and the hospital itself. I checked the screen. Unknown number. My hands shook as I answered. Hello, breathing, heavy, deliberate. Then, you'll regret this. Grant's voice, unmistakable. You'll have nothing. I'll make sure of it. The line went dead. I pressed the call button. The nurse came running. Within minutes, hospital security was there. Detective Ford arrived by 3 in the morning. Took my phone, documented everything. This is a restraining order violation, she said. He can't contact you directly. This goes to the judge. Will they revoke his bail? I asked, already knowing the answer. Detective Ford's expression told me everything. I'll push for it, but it's one phone call. First violation, the judge might issue a warning. A warning. Grant tried to murder me, and the system would give him a warning for making a threatening phone call. This was the reality I was learning. The justice system wasn't built to protect victims. It was built to protect defendants' rights. Constitutional, important, and absolutely failing people like me. The next morning, Becca arrived. My best friend since college, the one person Grant hadn't been able to completely cut me off from, though not for lack of trying. She was a nurse at Mount Sinai, had seen enough trauma cases to know what domestic violence looked like. She'd suspected for years. I'd lied to her for years. I should have pushed harder, she said the moment she saw me, tears streaming down her face. I saw the signs, the bruises you tried to hide, the excuses. I should have done something. It's not your fault. I told her, the words felt automatic. How many times had I absolved people of responsibility for not saving me? How many times had I taken the burden entirely on myself? Becca sat on the edge of the bed, took my hand. Tell me everything, from the beginning, the real beginning. So I did. Again. Because that's what trauma is, telling your story over and over, each time carving it deeper into your bones, making it real, making it matter, making sure you never forget and never let it happen again. When I finished, Becca wiped her eyes. He's not going to stop. You know that, right? Even with the restraining order, even with the charges, he'll keep coming. I know. You need protection, real protection, not just hospital security. I don't have money. I don't have resources. I don't have anything except this hospital bed and a baby on the way. Becca hesitated. What about Dylan? My breath caught. What about him? He's been here every day asking about you, not pushing, just checking in. He wants to help. Natalie, I can't accept charity from him. Not after everything. It's not charity if you need it. And you do need it. Pride doesn't stop bullets either. She was right. God help me. She was right. That afternoon, Dylan came to visit. 5 years since I'd last seen him. He looked exactly the same, dark hair starting to gray at the temples. Sharp gray eyes, tall and lean. He wore jeans and a sweater. Nothing flashy. He'd never been flashy. Hello, Natalie, he said. His voice exactly as I remembered. Deep, warm. No anger, no accusation, just concern. Dylan, my voice broke. I'm sorry about your car. He smiled. Small, sad. The car's fine. Are you sorry? I'm alive. Because you're a fighter. He moved closer, stopped at a respectful distance from the bed. I wanted you to know I have resources. A safe house and legal representation. Whatever you need, Wessel. No strings attached. Why? The question burst out. I left you. I hurt you. Why would you help me? His jaw tightened. Because what Grant did is unforgivable. Because that's your baby. Because it's the right thing to do. He paused. And because somewhere deep down, I think you're still the woman I loved. The one who was scared but also brave. Brave enough to finally tell the truth. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. 5 years of grief and regret and wishing I'd chosen differently, all of it rushing back at once. I'm not trying to rescue you, Dylan continued. You don't need rescuing. You're doing that yourself. But I'm here if you need support. A friend, whatever you need. No expectations. A friend, not a savior, not a white knight, just someone offering a hand without demanding I surrender my agency. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course. He pulled out a business card, set it on my bedside table. That's my direct line, 24/7. No question too small, no request too large. He walked to the door, stopped, looked back. For what it's worth, I forgave you a long time ago. Now you need to forgive yourself. Then he left. I picked up the card, stared at it, turned it over. Just his name, his number. No company, no title, just Dylan Westbrook and a way to reach him. Pride said no. Throw it away. Survive on your own. Don't depend on anyone, especially not the man you left. Survival said yes. Your daughter's life is at stake. Swallow your pride and live. That evening, Detective Ford returned with news. We executed a warrant on your apartment, searched it thoroughly. And she pulled out her phone, showed me photos, Grant's laptop, bank statements, credit card bills, and something else, a 3-ring binder. We found this in his office closet, Detective Ford said. Grant's evidence binder. She swiped through photos. Each one made my blood run colder. Pictures of me looking erratic, photos Grant had staged, catching me mid-sentence with unflattering expressions. Fake psychiatric evaluations claiming I had borderline personality disorder, was prone to self-harm, was a danger to myself and others. All forged, all backdated. Commitment papers for Brookfield. Psychiatric hospital. Pre-signed by Grant with a space left for a doctor's signature. Dated for 6 weeks after my due date. Custody petition. Filed but not yet submitted to court. Seeking sole custody of the minor child on grounds of maternal mental unfitness. He was going to have you committed, Detective Ford said quietly. After the baby was born, he'd convinced a psychiatrist, Dr. Martin Reynolds. We're investigating him now to sign off on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. Once you were inside, he'd extend it, keep you locked up while he filed for custody. My vision blurred. He wasn't trying to kill me in the fall. No, Detective Ford agreed. That was plan A. This was plan B. If you survived, he'd destroy your credibility. Take Harper and disappear. We found plane tickets to Costa Rica. One way. For him and someone named Ivy Monroe, leaving January 20th. Ivy, the mistress. Of course, there's more, Detective Ford continued. She pulled up text messages. Grant to Ivy, dated 3 months ago. After the fall, we wait 6 weeks. Then committer, baby's mine. Insurance money's ours. Fresh start in paradise. The fall. He'd been planning this for months. We also found a life insurance policy. $1 million on you, taken out 4 months ago, right after you got pregnant. Double indemnity for accidental death. $2 million if I died falling off a balcony. I couldn't breathe. The scope of his planning, his manipulation, his absolute commitment to erasing me, it was too much. Natalie, Detective Ford squeezed my hand. This changes everything. This is premeditated attempted murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy. Grant is looking at serious time. Decades, not years. He'll make bail again, I said numbly. Not this time. I'm filing for immediate bail revocation based on this evidence, and I'm recommending the DA upgrade charges to attempted murder 1. She left. I sat in the bed, mind spinning. Grant hadn't snapped. He hadn't lost control in a moment of rage. He'd planned my destruction methodically, carefully, with backup plans and escape routes and a mistress waiting in the wings. I was never a wife to him. I was an obstacle, a problem, something to be eliminated efficiently. The baby kicked hard, almost angry. Harper, my daughter who would have been raised by a monster, told lies about her mother, never knowing the truth. Not anymore. I picked up Dylan's card, Dialed the number. He answered on the first ring. Natalie, I need your help. I said all of it. The safe house, the lawyers, everything. I can't do this alone. You're not alone, Dylan said simply. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 15. 5 days after the fall, contractions started, 2 in the morning. Not strong, just tightening. Uncomfortable. Regular enough to be concerning. I called the nurse. She called Dr. Reynolds. Within 20 minutes, I was surrounded by medical staff. Braxton Hicks or real labor, I asked, trying to stay calm and failing. Dr. Reynolds examined me. Silent, focused. Finally spoke. Real labor. Very early stages. We're going to try to stop it. Buy you more time. Your baby needs a few more weeks. Medication through the IV. Something to relax my uterus. Stop the contractions. Keep Harper inside where she was safer. It worked. The contractions slowed. Stopped. Crisis averted. For now. This is a warning, Dr. Reynolds said afterward. Her expression was grave. Your body is trying to deliver. The stress, the trauma, it's too much. We might need to induce in the next week. Maybe sooner. She's only 32 weeks, I said. She's not ready. She's as ready as she'll be. And if we don't deliver soon, you'll go into labor naturally under worse conditions. The NICU here is excellent. We'll do everything possible to ensure she's healthy. After the medical staff left, I couldn't sleep. Lay in the dark, hand on my belly, feeling Harper move. Still fighting? Still here. My phone buzzed. Text from Becca. Heard about the contractions. I'm coming. Stay home, I replied. I'm fine. A lie, I wasn't fine, but Becca had already sacrificed so much time, so much energy. I couldn't keep taking from everyone. Another text, this one from Dylan. Moving you tomorrow. Safe house is ready. Security in place. Tomorrow. Leaving the hospital. Going somewhere new. Somewhere Grant didn't know about. Starting over. Again. Morning came with Detective Ford and bad news. I could tell by her expression before she even spoke. Grant violated the restraining order, she said. Last night, showed up outside the hospital, demanded to see you. Security stopped him. Police were called. He was arrested. My chest tightened. So he's back in jail. For now, bail hearing is this afternoon. The judge will decide if his bail is revoked or if he gets another chance. Another chance. Disbelief and rage fought for dominance. He tried to kill me. He threatened me. He violated a restraining order. How many chances does he get? That's up to the judge, Detective Ford said. She looked as frustrated as I felt. I've recommended bail revocation. The DA is pushing for it, but I can't make promises. She left. I sat in the bed, feeling hope drain away like water through cupped hands. The system wasn't protecting me. It was giving Grant chance after chance while I lived in fear, waiting for him to violate again, to hurt me again, to finish what he'd started. That afternoon, Becca came anyway, brought magazines, snacks, a change of clothes, sat beside my bed and held my hand while we waited for news about the bail hearing. The call came at 4 p.m. Detective Ford's voice was tight with controlled anger. The judge granted bail again, increased it to $750,000. Stricter monitoring, but Grant's out. I couldn't speak, couldn't process. His mother paid it, Detective Ford continued, took out a second mortgage. She's all in on protecting him. Where is he now? Back at her house. Ankle monitor is functioning. But Natalie, you need to understand paper doesn't stop determined people. Grant has shown he'll violate court orders. He's escalating. After she hung up, I turned to Becca. He's going to kill me. If not now, then later. At trial, after trial, someday, he's never going to stop. Becca's expression was fierce. Then we make sure he can't reach you. Dylan's safe house, 24/7 security. You disappear until trial, and then you destroy him in court. How his mother is a judge. He has expensive lawyers. I have nothing. You have the truth. You have evidence. You have people who believe you. She squeezed my hand. And you have Dylan's resources. Use them. This isn't charity. This is survival. She was right. I knew she was right. But accepting Dylan's help felt like admitting I couldn't save myself. and some deep, damaged part of me still believed I should be able to do this alone. That evening, Dylan came to finalize the move. He brought someone with him, a woman in her 50s, sharp suit, intelligent eyes, briefcase in hand. "Natalie, this is Judith Coleman," Dylan said. "She's a criminal defense attorney, one of the best in New York. She's agreed to represent you pro bono." "Judith, call me Jude." She insisted, pulled up a chair. "I've reviewed the preliminary case file. The evidence is strong. Video footage from your neighbor's security camera clearly shows Grant pushing you. Medical records document a pattern of abuse. Financial records establish motive. This is a winnable case. Grant's lawyers will say I'm mentally ill." I said. "That I jumped. That I'm lying." "Let them try," Jude replied. Her confidence was absolute. "We'll bury them in evidence, but I need you to be honest with me. Everything. Every incident. Every lie you told to cover for him. Every moment you thought about leaving, but didn't. All of it." So I told her, again, the fourth or fifth time I'd told this story, and each telling was simultaneously easier and harder. Easier because the words came automatically now. Harder because each repetition carved the trauma deeper. Jude took notes, asked questions, recorded everything with my permission. When I finished, she closed her notebook. "This is textbook premeditated attempted murder. The DA is charging him with attempted murder 1, assault with intent to kill, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. He's looking at 25 years minimum if convicted." "If," I said. "That's a big if." "I won't lie to you," Jude said. "Trials are unpredictable. Juries are human. Grant's team will attack your credibility viciously. They'll bring up your relationship with Dylan, suggest financial motivation, paint you as unstable. It will be brutal, but we'll prepare you. And we'll win." After they left, I sat alone in the darkening room. Harper kicked steadily, a rhythm like Morse code. Still here, still fighting. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. My heart rate spiked. I answered. "Hello." "Natalie," Grant's voice. Calm, too calm. "We need to talk." "You're violating the restraining order," I said. My voice shook. "This call is illegal. I'm using a friend's phone, untraceable. The police can't prove anything." He paused. "I want you to drop the charges." "Never. You don't understand what you're doing. My mother has connections. My lawyers are the best money can buy. You're going to lose, Natalie. And when you do, I'm taking Harper. You'll never see her again. You tried to murder me. I was upset, irrational. The gambling debts, the pressure, I snapped. But I'm getting help now. Therapy, anger management. I can be a good father. We can co-parent, but only if you drop the charges." The manipulation was so transparent, so practiced. He'd said these words before to other people, other victims. This was a script. "The answer is no," I said. "I'm testifying. I'm telling the truth. And you're going to prison." Silence. "Then you're making the biggest mistake of your life." The line went dead. I immediately called Detective Ford, reported the call. She promised to investigate, to trace it, to add it to the growing list of violations. But I knew the truth. The system was failing me. Grant had violated the restraining order 3 times now. He'd been arrested twice, and he was still free, still calling, still threatening. The justice system wasn't built to protect people like me. It was built to give people like Grant every possible chance, and I was running out of time. That night, the contractions started again, stronger this time, more regular, less responsive to medication. Dr. Reynolds made the call. "We're inducing tomorrow morning. Your body is trying to deliver, and we can't stop it anymore. Harper needs to be born. Tomorrow, my daughter would be born tomorrow. 5 weeks early, tiny, fragile, vulnerable, just like me. But we'd both survive this far, and we'd survive tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until Grant was locked away for good. We had to. They induced labor at 6 a.m., Pitocin drip, gradually increasing. Dr. Reynolds explained the process, but I barely heard her. My mind was spinning with fear and anticipation and the terrifying knowledge that in a few hours, Harper would be here, real, outside my body, vulnerable in ways I couldn't protect her from. Dylan sat in the corner of the delivery room. I'd asked him to stay, not because I needed him there, exactly, but because I needed someone. Becca was working a double shift. My family was states away, estranged after years of Grant's systematic isolation. Dylan was the only person I had. You don't have to watch. I told him during a contraction, breathing through the pain, you can wait outside. I'm staying, he said simply, unless you want me to leave. I didn't want him to leave. The labor progressed fast, too fast. My body had been trying to do this for days. Once the Pitocin started, everything cascaded quickly. 3 hours in, I was at 7 centimeters. The pain was manageable with the epidural, but the fear wasn't. Every contraction brought me closer to the moment when Harper would be in the world, exposed, at risk. What if I can't protect her? I asked Dylan during a brief lull. What if Grant finds a way to take her? What if the system fails and he gets custody? That's not going to happen, Dylan said. His certainty was absolute. Jude is building an airtight case. Detective Ford is documenting every violation. Grant is digging his own grave with every call, every threat. But what if, no what ifs, Dylan interrupted gently. One moment at a time. Right now, focus on bringing Harper into the world safely. Everything else, we'll handle as it comes. At noon, I was fully dilated. Dr. Reynolds gave the go-ahead to push. The next hour was pain and effort, and fear crystallized into pure physical reality. Push, breathe, push again. The epidural dulled the pain, but not the intensity. Not the overwhelming sensation of my body doing something ancient and powerful and utterly beyond my control. I can see her head, Dr. Reynolds said. One more big push. Natalie? I pushed, felt something give, felt Harper slip free, and then she was here. Tiny, pink, screaming, alive. It's a girl, Dr. Reynolds said, though I'd already known. Had known for months in some instinctive, cellular way. They put Harper on my chest, skin to skin, 30 seconds of perfect contact. She was so small, 4 pounds, maybe less. Her eyes were closed, her lungs working hard. She's beautiful, I whispered. Then they took her, rushed her to the NICU. Too small, too early, needed help breathing, needed monitoring. I watched them carry my daughter away, my arms empty, my chest aching. She's going to be okay, Dr. Reynolds said. The NICU here is one of the best. They'll take excellent care of her. I nodded. Didn't believe it. Couldn't believe anything good would last. The recovery room was quiet. Dylan sat beside me. Respectful distance. He hadn't left. Not once. Do you want to name her? He asked after a while. Harper, as I said him. Harper Amelia Pierce, not Holloway. Never Holloway. Pierce, Dylan repeated. Your maiden name? The only name that's actually mine. Dylan nodded, understanding without judgment. Harper Amelia Pierce. It's perfect. An hour later, a nurse came to take me to the NICU, wheelchair, because I was still recovering. Dylan stayed in the waiting room. This moment was mine alone. The NICU was bright, clinical, full of machines beeping and whooshing, tiny babies in plastic boxes with wires everywhere. Harper was in the back corner. Her isolette had her name written in dry erase marker, Baby Girl Pierce, not Holloway. The nurse had listened. You can touch her, the NICU nurse said gently. Through the portholes. I opened the portholes, put my hands inside, touched Harper's skin for the first time since birth. Warm, soft, real. Her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, held tight. Fight her, I whispered, just like her mom. I stayed until they made me leave. Needed rest, needed to recover. Promised I could come back in a few hours. Back in my room, I lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling. My body felt hollow, my arms empty, my daughter somewhere else, fighting battles I couldn't help with. That evening, Detective Ford came with news. Her expression was grim. Grant violated the restraining order again, showed up at the hospital, different entrance this time. Security caught him trying to access the maternity ward. Said he had a right to see his daughter. My blood went cold, though. He was trying to get to Harper. Yes, He was arrested immediately, taken to jail. This time, I'm confident the judge will revoke bail. 3 violations, clear escalation. Even the most lenient judge has limits. When's the hearing? Tomorrow morning. I'll let you know as soon as I have a verdict. After she left, I called Dylan. Grant tried to get to Harper, I said without preamble. I heard, Dylan replied. Security is being tripled at the NICU. No one gets near her without multiple ID checks. And tomorrow, hopefully, Grant goes back to jail for good. And if he doesn't, then we move to Plan B. The safe house has a secure nursery, 24/7 private security. Harper will be protected no matter what. I closed my eyes. Let Dylan's certainty wash over me. Wanted desperately to believe him. That night, I couldn't sleep. The room felt too empty without Harper. My body knew she should be here, close, nursing. Instead, she was floors away in the NICU, surrounded by machines. At 3 a.m., I went back to see her. The night nurse let me in without question. I sat beside Harper's isolette, hand through the porthole, fingers wrapped around hers. I'm sorry, Amba, I whispered, for bringing you into this mess, for not leaving sooner, for not protecting you better. Harper's heart monitor beeped steadily, strong, determined. But we're going to be okay, I continued. Tomorrow, your father goes back to jail, and we start building a life, a safe life, a free life. I promise, I meant it. God help me. I meant it. Even though every promise I'd ever made seemed to crumble eventually. The next morning, Detective Ford called at 8 a.m. Bail revoked, she said. No preamble, just the facts. Grant is being held without bail until trial. The judge finally saw the pattern. He's not getting out again. Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost vomited. He's really locked up. He's really locked up. Trial is set for 4 months from now, June 10th. Until then, he's in Rikers. He can't hurt you. He can't reach Harper. You're safe. Safe, that word. So small, so impossibly large. I hung up, sat in the bed, started crying. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. Grant was in jail. We were safe. Harper was safe. For the first time in 5 years. I could breathe without fear. It wouldn't last forever. There was still a trial ahead. Still months of waiting, preparing, testifying. Still the possibility that a jury might not believe me, might let Grant walk free. But for now, in this moment, we were safe. And that was enough. Hospital discharge came 6 days later. Harper would stay for at least 2 more weeks, maybe 3, until she was stronger, bigger, able to regulate her temperature and feed without assistance. Leaving her was agony. Every instinct screamed to stay, to protect, to watch over her every second. But I needed to heal, needed to prepare for trial, needed to get ready for the fight ahead. Dylan drove me to the safe house. It was in Westchester, 40 minutes north of the city. Not Dylan's property, he'd been clear about that. I fund the organization that runs it, he'd explained. But it's not mine. You're not staying in my house. This is about safety, not control. The safe house was small, maybe 800 square feet. Living room, kitchenette, bedroom, bathroom. Simple, functional, secure. Security cameras on every entrance. Panic button by the bed. Direct line to both private security and local police. A fortress disguised as a cottage. The nursery is ready, Dylan said, showing me the second bedroom. Crib, changing table, rocking chair, soft yellow walls, gender neutral. Perfect. I stood in the doorway, imagining Harper here, safe, away from Grant, free to grow without fear. Thank you, I said. Inadequate words, but all I had. You don't need to thank me, Dylan replied. Just focus on healing, getting strong, preparing for trial. He left. I was alone in the safe house, truly alone for the first time in years. No Grant monitoring my movements. No Claudia dropping by unannounced. No constant vigilance. Just me, and silence, and space to breathe. I walked through the cottage, touching surfaces, testing locks, learning the geography of this temporary home. In the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. A stranger looked back. Hollow eyes, bruised face mostly healed, but still showing yellow-green remnants. Too thin everywhere except my belly, which was deflating slowly, leaving stretched skin behind. This was what Grant had done. 5 years of slow destruction building to one violent Christmas morning. But I was alive. Harper was alive. And Grant was in jail. Small victories. Build on small victories. Becca came every day. Brought meals. Helped with physical therapy. Drove me to the NICU twice daily to see Harper. My daughter was gaining weight 4 pounds, 8 ounces. Then 4:15. Then 5 even. The breathing tube came out. She started bottle feeding. Small victories mounting steadily. 3 weeks after Harper's birth, Jude Coleman came to the safe house for trial preparation. She brought boxes of files evidence, witness list, legal precedents, trial strategy. We need to prepare you for cross-examination. Jude said, no softening, no easing into it. Grant's defense team will be brutal. They'll attack your credibility, your mental state, your relationship with Dylan, your decision to stay with Grant for 5 years. Everything is fair game. I understand. Do you? Jude's gaze was sharp, because understanding intellectually and experiencing it emotionally are very different. When they ask why you didn't leave sooner, when they suggest you're lying for money, when they imply you jumped intentionally, you need to stay calm. Stay consistent. Don't get defensive. We practiced. Hours of mock questioning. Jude playing the role of Grant's attorney, asking invasive questions designed to fluster me, trip me up, make me doubt myself. Why did you stay with Grant for 5 years if he was so abusive? I was scared. I had nowhere to go, no money, no job. He'd isolated me from friends and family. The pregnancy made leaving even more dangerous. But you have a college degree, marketing experience. You could have gotten a job. I tried. Grant sabotaged every interview, called my references, told potential employers I was unstable, unreliable. Why didn't you call the police? I was afraid. Grant threatened to kill me if I reported him, said he'd make it look like suicide. I believed him. But you're here now, testifying. If you were so afraid, why come forward? Because he tried to kill me, tried to kill our baby. I had no choice. Stay silent and die. Or speak up and fight. On and on. Relentless. Exhausting. By the 3rd hour, I was shaking. By the 5th, I wanted to scream. That's enough for today, Jude finally said. You're doing well. Better than most people would. I don't feel like I'm doing well. That's normal. You've been through trauma. Multiple traumas. Your brain is processing. Healing. It takes time. Time. Everyone kept saying that. Time heals. Time helps. Time makes it better. But time also meant waiting. Living in fear. Wondering if Grant would somehow get out. Somehow reach me. Somehow finish what he started. 4 weeks after Harper's birth, she came home, 5 pounds, 3 ounces, healthy, thriving, ready to leave the NICU. Dylan drove us to the safe house. I held Harper the entire way, protective and terrified. Every bump in the road, every car that got too close, every moment of vulnerability made my heart race. But we made it, safe, whole, together. The first night with Harper home was simultaneously perfect and terrifying. She slept in the bassinet beside my bed. I lay awake, listening to her breathe, convinced every tiny sound was a threat. Becca stayed over, helped with night feedings, let me rest, reminded me that babies are resilient, that I was doing fine, that panic was normal for new mothers, and especially normal for new mothers who'd survived attempted murder. Days blurred into weeks. Harper grew. 5 pounds became 6, then 7. She started focusing on faces, started making sounds that weren't just crying, small developmental milestones that felt miraculous. And through it all, trial preparation continued. Jude came twice a week. We rehearsed my testimony until I could recite it in my sleep. We reviewed evidence, the security video, the medical records, the insurance policy, Grant's text to Ivy planning my accident. The prosecution's case is strong, Jude said during one session. Video evidence is powerful. The jury will see Grant push you. They'll see you fall. There's no ambiguity. Grant's lawyers will say I'm lying, that I jumped, that I'm mentally ill. Let them try. We have expert witnesses, psychiatrists who will testify you show no signs of mental illness, domestic violence experts who will explain the pattern of abuse. The video speaks for itself. What if the jury doesn't believe me? Jude met my eyes. Then we appeal. But Natalie, I've been doing this for 23 years. I know a strong case when I see one. Grant is going to prison. The only question is for how long. I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that justice would prevail, that truth mattered, that the system would protect me this time. But I'd learned the hard way the system fails more often than it succeeds. 2 months before trial, Detective Ford came with news. She looked pleased, which was rare enough to make my heart race. We found Grant's previous girlfriend, she said, from 8 years ago. Before you? Her name is Laura Bennett. She's willing to testify. Testify about what? Grant's pattern of abuse. He did the same things to her: isolation, financial control, escalating violence. She finally left after he broke her arm, filed a police report but dropped the charges when he threatened her family. Another victim. Grant had done this before. Would have done it again if I hadn't survived. There's more, Detective Ford continued. Laura connected us with Grant's high school girlfriend, Madison Cooper. Similar story, emotional abuse, some physical violence. She was 17 when they dated. He was 20. She reported it to her parents, but they didn't pursue charges. A pattern. Not just with me. Multiple women, multiple incidents, a lifetime of violence. This establishes prior bad acts, Jude explained when I told her. The judge has to approve it. But if both women testify, the jury sees Grant isn't a good man who snapped once. He's a serial abuser. It's devastating for the defense. For the first time, I felt something like hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope I'd been clinging to, but something stronger. Rooted, based on evidence and law, in multiple women brave enough to tell the truth. We weren't alone. None of us were alone. 3 weeks before trial, Claudia made one last attempt. She showed up at the main gate of the property where the safe house sat. Security denied her entry. She demanded to see Harper, claimed grandparents' rights. The police explained no legal standing, not without custody, not without Grant's conviction being overturned. She couldn't force her way in. She left screaming, threatening, promising she'd be back. That family stuck together. That I'd regret this, but her threats felt hollow now. Grant was in jail. Trial was approaching. The evidence was overwhelming. She'd already lost. She just didn't know it yet. The night before trial, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, Harper in the bassinet beside me, listening to her breathe. Steady, peaceful, unaware that tomorrow her mother would walk into a courtroom and fight for both their futures. I thought about Grant, about the charming man I'd met 6 years ago, about the moment I'd chosen him over Dylan because he felt safer, more normal, more attainable. How wrong I'd been, how catastrophically, life-threateningly wrong. But I'd survived. We'd survived. And tomorrow, I'd tell my truth. All of it. No more hiding. No more protecting Grant. No more shame. Tomorrow, justice had a chance. And I was ready. The courthouse was enormous. All marble columns and imposing architecture designed to intimidate. People everywhere, lawyers, reporters, spectators. Everyone wanting to see, to watch, to judge. Jude walked beside me. Dylan slightly behind. Security around us. Protection from cameras, questions, noise. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than expected. Wood paneling, high ceilings. The judge's bench elevated and imposing. The jury box empty. Waiting. Grant sat at the defense table. Orange jumpsuit. Handcuffs. His lawyers on either side in expensive suits. Confident expressions. Ready for battle. Our eyes met. He smirked. Small. Cruel. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he'd already won. I looked away. Refused to engage. Focused on breathing. On surviving the next few hours. Jury selection took 2 days. Question after question. Weeding out bias. Finding 12 people who could be impartial. Who could listen. Who could decide based on evidence. Finally, 6 men. 6 women. Range of ages and backgrounds. 12 strangers who held my future in their hands. Opening statements began. The prosecutor stood Assistant District Attorney Marcus Brennan, 40-something, sharp, no nonsense. The evidence will show, he began, voice carrying across the courtroom, that Grant Holloway planned to murder his pregnant wife. He took out life insurance. He documented her supposed mental instability. He isolated her, controlled her, abused her. And on Christmas morning, he pushed her off a fifth-story balcony, hoping she would die. Marcus showed the video, security footage on a large screen, me on the balcony, Grant behind me, his hands on my back. The push, my arms reaching, falling, the impact, gasps, shocked silence, murmurs rippling through the courtroom. I couldn't watch. Looked at my hands, at the table, anywhere else. Grant's lead attorney stood Eleanor Walsh, 50-ish, polished, expensive, a hired gun with a reputation for destroying witnesses. Natalie Holloway was depressed, Eleanor began. Her voice was smooth, sympathetic, manipulative. Suicidal, overwhelmed by pregnancy. She jumped. My client tried to save her, failed, and now she's trying to destroy him, to blame him for her own actions, to seek revenge for an affair she discovered. Lies, all lies, but delivered with conviction, authority, the confidence of expensive legal representation. The trial began, witness after witness, building the case piece by piece. Detective Ford testified about the investigation, the evidence, the text, the insurance policy, the planning. Dr. Reyes testified about my injuries, the pregnancy complications, the medical evidence consistent with assault, not a suicide attempt. Marcus questioned thoroughly, methodically, establishing facts, creating timeline, building narrative. Eleanor cross-examined aggressively, attacking credibility, suggesting alternatives, planting doubt. 3 days in, my turn came. I walked to the stand, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, sat facing the courtroom, facing Grant, facing the jury. Marcus stood, began questioning, gentle, supportive, walking me through my story, meeting Grant, the courtship, the marriage. The first incident, Grant grabbing my wrist during an argument. His apology, my forgiveness. Year 2, isolation. Grant criticizing my friends until I stopped seeing them, monitoring my spending, checking my phone. Small controls that felt protective at first, sinister later. Year 3, the verbal abuse. You're lucky I married you. No one else would want you. You're stupid, fat, ugly. Words designed to destroy self-worth. Make me believe I deserve the treatment. Year 4, physical abuse, shoving, hair pulling, accidental bruises that were never accidental. The beating that put me in bed for a week. Grant's mother covering for him, telling people I'd fallen downstairs. Year 5, the pregnancy, Grant's rage, his planning, the insurance policy, the commitment papers, Christmas morning, the push. I told everything, every detail, every incident. 5 years compressed into 3 hours. My voice stayed steady, clear, no apologies, no qualifications, just truth. The jury listened. Some took notes, some watched Grant, some watched me, assessing, judging, deciding. Then Eleanor stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Holloway, she began, smile predatory, prepared. You claim my client abused you for 5 years, yet you never called police, never filed a report, never sought help. Why not? I was afraid. He threatened to kill me if I told anyone. But you told your friend Becca, correct? Yes. And she didn't call police either. Why not? I asked her not to. I wasn't ready. I thought I could handle it. Handle it by staying, by marrying him, by getting pregnant. I didn't get pregnant on purpose. And I stayed because he'd isolated me. I had no job, no money, no support system. You have a college degree, marketing experience. You could have left any time. I tried to leave, multiple times. He'd find me, bring me back, threaten me. It was safer to stay. Safer to stay with a man you claim was abusive. That seems contradictory, doesn't it? Deep breath, stay calm. It's not contradictory when you understand a bomb. Leaving is the most dangerous time. Women are most likely to be killed when they try to leave. I was surviving, waiting for the right moment. And that moment came when you landed on your billionaire ex-boyfriend's car. How convenient. Objection. Marcus stood. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. Move on, Ms. Walsh. But the implication lingered. Poison the air. The questioning continued. Hours of relentless attacks, every decision questioned, every choice ignored, every moment I'd stayed dead, every moment I hadn't fought back. You claim you were terrified, yet you got pregnant, stayed pregnant. That doesn't sound like terror. I considered abortion. I was terrified, but I couldn't do it. I wanted my daughter. So you admit you stayed because you chose to, not because you were trapped. I was trapped by hope, by fear, by financial dependence, by isolation. It's all the same trap. Or perhaps you stayed because you were planning this all along. You'd reconnect with Dylan Westbrook, your wealthy ex-boyfriend. You'd accuse my client of attempted murder. You'd take everything. That's not true. Grant pushed me. The video shows it. The video shows my client's hand on your back. It doesn't show intent. It doesn't prove attempted murder. On and on, twisting everything, making my survival look like calculation, making my fear look like manipulation. When she finally said, "No further questions," I stepped down, shaking, exhausted, violated. But I told the truth, all of it. That had to count for something. The next day, the defense called witnesses, Grant's coworkers, neighbors, people who'd seen our marriage from outside, who thought Grant was charming, devoted, wonderful. They hadn't seen the private Grant, the one who controlled, who raged, who hurt. They'd seen the mask. Claudia testified, defended her son, attacked me, called me unstable, manipulative, a gold digger. She cried on the stand real tears for her son's suffering. Not for me, not for Harper, not for what he'd done. Then came the prosecution's rebuttal witnesses. Laura Bennett, Grant's ex-girlfriend from 8 years ago. She testified about the pattern, isolation, control, escalating violence, the broken arm that finally made her leave. Madison Cooper, Grant's high school girlfriend. Similar story, different details, same pattern. 2 more women, 2 more victims, a lifetime of violence. The jury listened. Some looked at Grant differently now, seeing him not as a good man who snapped, but as a serial abuser. Finally, while both sides rested, closing arguments began. Marcus summarized. Clear, strong, pointing to evidence video, text, medical records, insurance policy, pattern of abuse. Grant Holloway is a dangerous man, Marcus concluded. He planned to murder his wife. He failed, and now he must face consequences. The evidence is overwhelming. The verdict must be guilty. Eleanor countered. Reasonable doubt, mental instability, alternative explanations. The prosecution wants you to see a monster, she said. But Grant Holloway is a man who snapped under pressure, who made mistakes, who never intended murder. The evidence is ambiguous. The verdict must be not guilty. The jury retired to deliberate. The wait was agony. Hours, then a day, then 2 days. What were they discussing? What doubts did they have? Were they believing, Grant believing, Claudia doubting me? Jude stayed confident. Long deliberation is good, means they're thorough. But doubt gnawed at me, constant, suffocating. Day 3 of deliberation, a note from the jury, questions about the video, about timeline, about the insurance policy. Good signs, Jude said. Focusing on evidence, not emotion. Day 4, another note. They'd reached a verdict. We returned to the courtroom. Everyone standing. The jury filed in, faces neutral, unreadable. The judge spoke. Has the jury reached a verdict? The 4-person stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder in the 1st degree, how do you find? Time stopped. The courtroom held its breath. My heart pounded. Harper was with Becca, safe, unaware. We find the defendant guilty. The word crashed over me. Guilty. The jury believed me. believed the evidence, convicted Grant. More charges, assault, fraud, insurance fraud, all guilty, every count. Grant's face went white, then red. He stood, tried to speak. His lawyers pulled him down. Claudia screamed. Security escorted her out. The judge thanked the jury, dismissed them, set sentencing for 2 weeks. Grant was remanded. No bail, taken away in handcuffs. As they let him out, he looked at me, mouthed something. Might have been, "I'll kill you." Might have been, "I love you." Impossible to tell. Didn't matter. He was convicted, going to prison, away from me, away from Harper, away from our lives. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Questions, cameras, microphones. Jude handled them. I just stood, numb, disbelieving, grateful. Dylan was there, quiet, supportive. "How do you feel?" he asked. Empty, I admitted. Relieved, terrified, everything. That's normal. It takes time to process. Becca brought Harper. I held my daughter. Tight, safe, free. "It's over," Becca whispered. But was it sentencing was still ahead? Grant's appeals, the years of looking over my shoulder. Nothing was truly over. But this chapter was closing. And that was enough. 2 weeks after the verdict, we returned for sentencing. The courtroom was packed reporters, victim advocates, survivors from other cases. The trial had become national news. My story, once private and shameful, now public and emblematic of something larger. Grant sat at the defense table in his orange jumpsuit, thinner than before, eyes hollow. 2 weeks in Rikers had aged him. Good. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Morgan, 60-something, stern, no nonsense, called the court to order. "Before I impose sentence," Judge Morgan said, "the victim has right to my statement. Mrs. Pierce, would you like to address the court?" Mrs. Pierce, not Holloway. I'd legally changed my name back 2 days after the verdict, reclaiming the identity Grant had tried to erase. I stood, walked to the podium, faced Grant for what I hoped was the last time. I'd written a statement, revised it dozens of times. But now, looking at him, the prepared words felt insufficient. I spoke from the heart instead. "Grant, you taught me something important." I began. My voice was steady, clear. "The prison door was always unlocked. I locked myself in with fear, with hope you'd change, with shame. But you didn't put me there. I did, and only I could leave." Grant stared at me, expression unreadable. "You tried to kill me. You tried to kill our daughter. You planned my destruction methodically, carefully, with backup plans and escape routes. You weren't a good man who snapped. You were a predator who calculated." The courtroom was silent, everyone listening. "You'll never meet Harper. Not because I hate you. Hate requires energy I won't spend on you. But because I love her, and love means protection, even from biology." I paused, gathered myself. "I don't forgive you. Forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me. And I'm not there yet. Maybe never. But I'm free, and you can't take that from me again." I sat down, hands shaking, but I'd said what needed saying. Judge Morgan nodded. "Thank you. Mrs. Pierce," she turned to Grant. "Mr. Holloway, do you wish to speak on your own behalf?" Grant stood. His lawyer whispered urgently, trying to stop him. He ignored her. "I never meant to hurt anyone," he said, voice shaking, performing remorse. "I was sick, under pressure, the gambling debts, the stress. I snapped. I'm getting help now. Therapy. I can change." The manipulation was transparent, rehearsed, the same script he'd used on me 4 years. Judge Morgan's expression didn't change. "Mr. Holloway, you've been convicted by a jury of your peers based on overwhelming evidence. Your claims of temporary insanity ring hollow given the premeditation, the insurance policy, the planning. You are a danger to society, to women, to your own child." She opened a file, reviewed it, looked up. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 20 years in state prison. On the charge of assault with intent to kill, I sentence you to 10 years, to run consecutively. On the charges of insurance fraud and conspiracy, 5 years each, to run consecutively. Total sentence, 40 years. You are eligible for parole after serving 32 years. 40 years. Grant would be 72 when he got out. Harper would be in her 30s. I would be 68. A lifetime? An entire lifetime where he couldn't hurt us. Grant's face crumpled. No, he said. No, please. You are remanded to the custody of the Department of Corrections. Judge Morgan continued. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Guards moved in, took Grant away. He looked back at me one last time, pure hatred in his eyes. Then he was gone. Outside, the sun was shining. March sunshine, tentative but warming. Spring coming after the longest winter. Dylan waited with Harper. Becca stood beside them. My found family. The people who'd believed me, supported me, helped me survive. I took Harper from Dylan's arms, held her close, breathed her in. It's really over, Becca said. It's really over, I agreed. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. Trauma doesn't end with a verdict. PTSD doesn't disappear because the abuser goes to prison. Healing is long, nonlinear, often backwards. Still, this was closure. Real, legal, permanent closure. And that was something. 6 months after Grant's sentencing, I moved out of the safe house into my own apartment. Small 1-bedroom in Washington Heights. Not fancy, but mine. My name on the lease, my deposit, my responsibility. Harper's crib was in my bedroom. There wasn't space for a nursery, but we didn't need much space. Just safety, just freedom. I'd taken a job at Dylan's company, marketing director, my choice, my terms, competitive salary, benefits, respect. When Dylan first offered, I'd hesitated, worried about appearances, about people thinking he'd given me charity. I'm not offering charity, Dylan had said. I'm offering a position you're qualified for. Interview with the team, prove yourself. If they don't want to hire you, I won't overrule, but give yourself a chance. I'd interviewed, proven myself. The team voted to hire me. No special treatment, no favoritism, just qualifications and experience. 6 months in, I was excelling, respected, valued. Myself again. Finally, fully. Therapy helped. Twice weekly EMDR sessions with a trauma specialist named Dr. Sarah Collins. We worked through the abuse, the fall, the trial, processing memories, reducing triggers, rebuilding my sense of safety. Healing isn't linear. Dr. Collins reminded me during one session after I'd had a panic attack in the grocery store. A man had grabbed my arm to get my attention about something innocuous, and I'd completely dissociated. You're not failing, she continued. You're healing. And healing means confronting the trauma, not avoiding it. Progress isn't always forward. Sometimes it's sideways. Sometimes it's backward. But you're moving. I started a domestic violence advocacy nonprofit. Small at first, just me and a website. But it grew. Survivors reached out, shared stories, asked for resources. Dylan's company matched my donations. Other corporations joined. Within 6 months, we had funding for a hotline, legal aid referrals, emergency shelter assistance. I testified before the state legislature about stronger restraining order laws, about bail reform, about the systematic failures that allowed abusers like Grant to violate orders repeatedly without consequences. Some laws changed, small victories, but every small victory saved someone. Harper grew. 8 months became 9, then 10, then a year. She started walking lurching. Really, those early uncertain steps. Started talking mama first, then no, which became her favorite word. She'd never know Grant, never know fear, never know what her mother survived to give her this life. I'd tell her someday, when she was older, when she could understand. But now she just needed love, safety, security, happiness. And I gave her all of it. Dylan and I remained friends, just friends. He never pushed, never demanded, just showed up consistently, reliably, without expectation. Are you dating anyone? Becca asked one evening. We were having dinner at my apartment, Harper asleep in the next room. No, bye, and I admitted. The idea of trusting someone, being vulnerable, it terrifies me. That's normal. After what you went through. Are you dating? I asked. Turnabout. No, Dylan had said earlier that day when I'd asked him the same question. I've been focused on other things, like being there for you, he'd continued. As a friend, whatever you need. I appreciated his patience, his respect, his understanding that I needed time, maybe lots of time, maybe forever. But I also felt something shifting, slowly, carefully, the idea that maybe someday when I was ready, I could try again, trust again, love again. Not now, not yet, but someday, and someday was enough. 1 year after the trial, Harper's first birthday party, small gathering at my apartment. Becca, Jude, Detective Ford, Dr. Reynolds, found family, the people who'd saved me, supported me, believed me. Dylan arrived with presents, too many presents. I can't help myself, he said, not apologizing. Harper toddled toward him. He picked her up, made her laugh. She had no idea who he was, not really, just a kind man who showed up, who was safe, who made her mother smile. The doorbell rang. I tensed, still did, probably always would, but it was just the delivery person with the cake. We sang happy birthday. Harper smashed her face into the cake, getting frosting everywhere. Perfect, beautiful, normal. Later, after everyone left, I sat in the rocking chair with Harper. She was drowsy, fighting sleep like toddlers do. We made it, I whispered. 1 year. We survived. She grabbed my finger, held tight. I thought about Grant. In prison. 40 years. He'd appealed. Of course. His lawyers had filed motion after motion. All denied. The conviction stood. Sometimes I wondered if he thought about us, if he regretted his choices, if prison had changed him. Probably not. Abusers rarely change. They just find new victims or learn to hide better. But he couldn't hurt us anymore. That was all that mattered. I closed my eyes, rocked Harper gently, let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, not happiness, not yet. That felt too simple for what I'd survived. But peace, wholeness, freedom. And that was enough. More than enough. 18 months after Grant's sentencing, I received a letter, forwarded through my lawyer, prison mail, from Grant. I stared at the envelope. My hands shook. I could burn it. Refused to read it. Maintain the distance I'd fought so hard to create, but curiosity won. I opened it. The letter was short. 2 paragraphs. Grant's handwriting, careful and controlled. Natalie, I never meant to hurt you. I was sick, addicted to gambling, under pressure. I snapped. But I'm getting help now. Therapy, addiction counseling, anger management. I'm becoming the man I should have been. Can Harper visit it? I'm her father. She deserves to know me. Please consider it. I'm sorry for everything. Grant. I read it twice, then a third time. The manipulation was still there. The self-pity, the refusal to take full responsibility. I snapped instead of I chose violence. I'm sorry instead of acknowledging the calculated premeditation. Some things never changed. I sat at my kitchen table. Harper played nearby with blocks. Happy, safe, oblivious. I wrote a response. Not to Grant, he'd never read it, but for myself, for closure, for the final word. Grant, you taught me that the prison door was always unlocked. I kept myself trapped with fear, with hope, with shame. But I walked out, and I'm never going back. You'll never meet Harper. Not because I hate you, hate requires energy I won't waste on you, but because I love her, and love means protection, even from biology. I don't forgive you. Forgiveness is for me, not you. And I'm not there yet. Maybe never. But I'm free. And you can't change that. Don't write again. Natalie. I burned both letters. Watched them turn to ash in my kitchen sink. Symbolic. Cathartic. Final. That evening, Dylan stopped by my unannounced, which was becoming more common. Comfortable. Bad day, he asked, reading my expression. Grant sent a letter. Wants to meet Harper. Dylan's jaw tightened. What did you say? I said no. Burn the letter. Close that door permanently. He nodded. Approval. Understanding. Good. We sat on my couch. Harper climbed into Dylan's lap. She did that now, comfortable with him, trusting. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Why are you still here, really? It's been 18 months. You could be dating, moving on, living your life. But you're here. Why? Dylan was quiet for a long moment. Harper played with his watch, babbling to herself. Because I'm not waiting for you to be ready, he finally said. I'm just here, living my life. And my life includes you and Harper. As friends, maybe someday as something more. Maybe not. Either way, I'm here. That's not fair to you, I said. Waiting indefinitely. I'm not waiting indefinitely. I'm living. You're in my life. That's enough. Is it? He looked at me, really looked. Those gray eyes that had once intimidated me now felt like home. Yes, he said simply. It is. Something shifted in that moment. Some last barrier I'd been holding up. Some last protection against vulnerability. I'm not ready for a relationship, I said. Honest, clear. I don't know when I'll be ready. If I'll be ready. The idea of trusting someone that way again, it terrifies me. I know, Dylan replied, and that's okay. But I think about it, I continued, voice barely above a whisper. About us, about maybe trying again someday, when I'm whole on my own, when I'm not broken. You're not broken, Dylan said, fierce, certain. You're healing. There's a difference. Was there maybe? Maybe healing and broken could coexist. Maybe wholeness didn't mean undamaged. Maybe it just meant integrated all the pieces, even the shattered ones, held together by something stronger than they'd been before. Someday, I said, a promise, a possibility. Someday is enough, Dylan replied. Someday is hope. He left shortly after. Harper waved goodbye from my arms. Bye-bye, she said. New phrase, new skill. I closed the door, locked it habit, necessary habit, checked the windows, the locks, the security system, routines I'd probably never lose, but I didn't feel trapped anymore. The safety measures weren't until I saw them. They were choices, my choices, made from a place of agency, not fear. I put Harper to bed. Read her 3 books. Her requirement, non-negotiable. Sang a lullaby. Watched her drift off to sleep. In my own bed, I lay in the dark and thought about the past 3 years, about meeting Grant, about leaving Dylan, about the slow descent into abuse, about the fall, about survival, about everything that came after. People often asked me if I was happy. I never knew how to answer. Happy felt too simple for what I'd survived, too insufficient for the complexity of trauma and healing and rebuilding. But I was free, genuinely, completely free. Free from Grant, free from fear, free from the prison I'd built in my own mind. And freedom felt like the beginning of something, not an ending, a beginning. I thought about Dylan's words, someday is hope. He was right. Someday was hope. Someday meant future, meant possibility, meant that this moment, this life, this freedom, it was just the start. Harper would grow up in a world where she knew her mother was strong, where she understood that leaving was always possible, where she learned that love didn't mean control, that family didn't mean obligation, that safety was a right, not a privilege. I'd teach her, show her by example, by living, by refusing to let Grant's violence define me, by choosing every day to be whole. The next morning, I woke to Harper calling from her crib. Mama up, I got her, changed her diaper, made breakfast, went to work, lived my life, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.